Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com. Today we're taking a quick look at and installing the armrest cover with the Mustang GT embroidery, available for all 05 to 09 Mustangs. You should be checking this out if you're looking for the utmost custom styling for your center console here. And as you can see, the owner of this vehicle is all about custom styling, so this is a really good addition to the interior. This is basically a simulated leather or a faux leather with some nice black stitching down the sides here, while also having the embroidered GT Mustang logo right on the top here in a nice silver finish. It's a really nice piece of fabric, but I will say it does take some patience and some time to get installed. A little bit of upholstery work you'll be doing to get this installed, but it does come in right around 35 bucks, so it is very affordable, and it makes a huge difference to the interior. The first thing you notice when you get in here, because that's where your arm is basically going to go every time you're driving, along with your passenger, so it really does pull a lot of attention to the center console. Now this particular interior has a lot of yellow and black theme going on, along with some carbon fiber, and yet it still blends in pretty nicely. So I do think this is a good addition to really any interior finish. The install is going to get the full 3 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. There is a lot of custom cutting, there is a lot of adhesive work that needs to be done, and really it's going to take a lot of patience and pretty accurate skill to get this to fold in properly. You're going to need some experience in the upholstery field. You definitely want to watch a couple of videos if you're not really familiar on the process, and if you're not comfortable tackling it yourself, no shame handing it over to a professional upholstery shop. The good thing is we can actually just unbolt the armrest itself to get it off and work on a table, which is what we're going to be doing here. So just have a Phillips head screwdriver on deck, along with some spray adhesive. I definitely recommend adhesive promoter as well. You want some alcohol wipes to make sure the area is completely clean. You want to have a very mild grit sandpaper on deck as well to give that a nice fine tooth on top for the adhesive to grip to. And really that's going to be it. You also want to have a box cutter, and the box cutter is going to help you make some relief cuts, and I'll show you guys some of that process a little bit later on. Just know it takes a lot of patience. It's going to take a couple of hours, I'm going to be honest with you. It's also going to take some pretty good skill. With all of that in mind, I'll take you through the whole process. Now, of course, there's a ton of ways to skin a cat, so a lot of guys may do it some different methods. I'm going to show you my method to get this installed, so what do you say we get started? Tools used in this install include spray adhesive, Phillips head screwdriver, a marker or a Sharpie, some mild grit sandpaper, adhesion promoter, alcohol prep pads, and a box cutter or sharp blade. Now the first step here is actually we're just going to remove our armrest cover completely. Now it's going to be way easier to work on this outside of the vehicle, so I'm going to grab a Phillips head screwdriver and remove the 4 Phillips head screws holding it to the top bracket. So you just want to pop this open, take off all 4 of these screws. You want to make sure you're holding on to them because they will be reinstalled a little bit later on. So I'm just going to put them right here in the center console. All right, once you have that last screw taken off, remove your armrest cover and let's get it on the table. So we got the armrest cover out of Bumblebee behind me here, and what we have to do is disassemble a couple more things underneath of the pad. So we're just gonna take this whole plastic interior out, which is really just 6 Phillips head screws again. So pick up your Phillips head, we're gonna knock out all 6 of these screws, we'll set that aside, and it'll make it easier on us when it comes time to apply the upholstery. All right, with those 6 screws removed, we can just pop this off, and it gives us a better surface to work on. Now the next step here is to grab a very mild grit of sandpaper just to, rub across the top surface of our pad here. What that's basically gonna do is cause a little bit more tooth, give it a little bit more bite for the adhesive to grip to. This surface right now is a really soft plush leather. Making it a little bit more rough is gonna be very helpful for the adhesive. So what we're gonna do is grab this, lightly go around all of the top of the pad here. Then we're gonna use a couple of alcohol pads, alcohol wipes to clean it off. Those are two very important steps. So we're gonna make sure we get that done properly, so let's get to it. Just wanna make sure you're getting all around the edges as well. Flip it over and do the same thing for the edges down here. All right, at this point, what we're gonna do next is grab our alcohol prep pads and we're gonna clean the whole surface, getting all of that dust and dirt and all that stuff we just grinded off, making sure it's a smooth surface and a clean surface. All right, so we're gonna take that alcohol pad and we're gonna clean off the whole surface, which will help the adhesive bond as well. All right, just to be thorough, I'm gonna use a second pad as well. We're gonna touch up the bottom and the back side as well. All right, once you hit the back side, the edges, just touch it up. What we're gonna do is grab a big piece of cardboard or something to cover our table with. That way we have a nice surface that we're able to spray the adhesive on. At this point, we have our armrest cover face down on our cardboard here. Just wanna make sure you're brushing off any excess dirt, dust, something on the back side here. We're gonna take our armrest, flip it upside down, orient it the way we want. So this is the top of the armrest. We want that logo just about where these two screws are. We want the top of the logo right about here. So we're basically just gonna line this up, get that logo centered, and then put it about where we want on the armrest. You wanna make sure it's straight. You can use the stitching as a guideline to make sure that that is straight and even. Once you have that where you want it, I'm actually gonna use this neon green marker to just draw a line straight across to mark the top and the bottom. So I know that that is where we're gonna go. Mark the sides here too, just do a quick line. All right, and we can have that center point as well. Perfect, those are gonna be our indicators. Now the next step here, we're actually gonna take our headliner and carpet adhesive. This is a really good thing to use. You can also use 3M brand. Any kind of spray adhesive that is meant for this type of fabric and upholstery, it's really good to use. So what I'm gonna do basically is break this up into sections. First, I'm gonna start by spraying the adhesive on the back side of our cover, right about where that GT Mustang logo and embroidery is. So we're gonna take this top portion and not worry about the sides, just this little section. We're also gonna spray the top portion of the actual armrest. This way, when we apply this, it can set, cure on top of the armrest pad and give us some leverage and be able to, pull the sides into place, get everything nice and tight, so we'll have that starting point. So I'm gonna grab this, we're gonna spray once, we're gonna spray this, let it sit for a minute, let it get a little bit dry, spray again, and then we'll let that sit. You just wanna get the adhesive nice and tacky. You don't want it to be too dry, but you also don't want it to be too wet. You want to be able to put your finger on it and pull off and feel that tackiness without it being too dry or too wet. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right, at this point I can feel that it is pretty tacky, so I'm going to hit it once more. We're gonna let that sit again, just get nice and tacky, and then we're gonna flip this and apply it where we need it to be. All right, at this point, we got it nice and tacky, you can feel that. We're gonna flip it over and carefully reposition it where we want it to be. Check out that marked line that we have that set, line it up with the bottom one, same thing on the sides. You can also pick it up and just inspect where we've got it, just being careful that we're not repositioning it. At this point, we're gonna lay it flat. We have a panel removal tool here. Essentially with our flat portion, we can start to apply this and get it nice and tight. looking like a pretty good location for it. You just want to be mindful of that top lip, making sure you're rolling that up into the lip. We're going to let that set for a minute, making sure it's nice and tight before we step away. Now at this point we have our armrest cover face up. We can see that this is drying pretty well. It's at the point where it is pretty tacky and pretty dried up. So what we're basically going to do is fold this excess portion over and do the same thing to this bottom half. We're not going to worry about the edges again. We're just going to go from the stitching in, and we're not going to go to our top line. That's really important why we made that line. So now we can see this line goes all the way down to the edge. We're going to come up about 1 inch short of that. We just want to cover this top face. I'm going to grab the adhesive again. We're going to hit that top cover. And do the same thing for the actual pad. Let that get dried up, a little tacky. I'll hit the cover one more time and then we'll pull it down. All right, so we got this really tacky. So what we're gonna do is add another coat to both, let that dry a little bit, get nice and tacky again, and then we'll apply it. Now at this point, we're getting ready to apply it. Now I don't want to pull, I want to be able to push. So I'm going to rotate this, bring it a little closer to myself. What I'm going to do essentially is push from the inside and like roll it forward so we can try to get out as much air as possible. Trying to pull it nice and tight against the body here. Once we have that, we can begin pushing out all of the bubbles and the wrinkles and get it nice and tight and flat. I'm going to start from the center and just keep pushing outward. Now as you let this dry, you want to be checking on it to make sure it doesn't build up any bubbles and wrinkles. If it does, just make sure you're pushing it out. All right, at this point we have to start working on our bottom edge that rolls down. So what we're gonna do is actually just pick this up, we're gonna flip it over, lay it right on its face. So we're gonna push down on the edge here. I'm gonna spray inside. We're gonna let that, get nice and tacky like we have been. Then we're gonna roll it up. Now the difficult part is gonna be when you're rolling this bottom portion, the stitching, being that it's kind of on this curved point, is gonna wanna bubble outward. So you wanna make sure you're rolling this straight. So the stitching, visually, wraps straight back. So it's gonna be a little bit of a challenge, but we can definitely get it done. Okay, we're gonna let that get a little tacky, spray it again, and we'll roll it. So for the second coat, I actually pulled it forward so the fabric actually flops down off the side of the table. It gives me a little bit more access to underneath of it. All right, let's let that dry up. All right, at this point, we're gonna pull this cover back into the table and we're gonna roll this and get it as centered as possible. Make sure you're rolling it tight as well. I'm going to go from underneath and just put pressure all along to make sure that this is adhering. From here, what we're going to do is work on one side and start rolling that up so it's all completely flush against the outside edge here. We're not worried about the inside lip just yet. We're gonna get everything rolled up just like this on the one side. That will eliminate any of these wrinkles. We can have that pulled tight, and then from there we can make cuts, relief cuts, as we need to for the tuck on the inside. So for now, I'm just gonna do one side, focus on one side at a time. We have a little bit of excess here. What we wanna do is we're going to spray right inside. Be mindful of where you're spraying as well. All right, so we're going to prop this up and just give it one more coat straight across here. All right, now we can let this dry. All right, at this point, we're going to roll the sides inward and try to get out as much of those wrinkles as we can. Now that we have our bottom piece adhered all the way up to this lip, we have our side piece here on the right side all the way up to that lip. We're not going to worry about folding this over just yet. We want to do the same thing to the other side. We're going to get this to start adhering to the side of our armrest. We're going to bring that up so it matches just like that. Then we'll start working on making our relief cuts. All right, we're gonna get that nice and tacky, and then we'll start folding everything back. All right, at this point we got it nice and tacky to the touch on both sides. We're gonna go ahead and start rolling it upward. Gonna get nice and smooth. Rolling it with your palm. You wanna make sure that the leather does not have any wrinkles or bubbles. Now we don't want to go too far into the bottom portion, you just want to make sure you're focusing your attention on the side here. Now we can let that side dry, and then we'll move on. All right, at this point, we're gonna break out our knife. Now you want like something like an X-Acto knife. We have a little box cutter edge here, really sharp, small blade. That's gonna help us slice right through this. Now, at this point, we have what's sort of like a bowl, right? So like it's cupped around the edges. We've got it loosened up here. We're gonna start by folding over one side as if it was adhered. So this is essentially what that would look like. Once we get to this rounded corner, it starts to buckle and wanna fold in on itself. The way around that is to cut what we're gonna call a relief cut into it. What that basically means is, where this would start buckling over, we're gonna find where that meets the edge of our armrest. Basically, we're gonna take our blade right at the edge where that meets the armrest and cut right back on an angle. That's really gonna separate the side from this back portion. At that point, we can fold the side over and adhere that right up to this lip and separate that from the bottom. The bottom will fold in separately. That way we can avoid any folds that you would see from the outside and have it overlap instead on the inside. That's what it wants to do. It wants to overlap, but they're gonna roll over each other like this. We want it cut so it can be a lot cleaner, and we can do that from the inside. So what we're gonna do is find that point of contact. So it looks like it's right about here. So on the inside, we're gonna cut from right about here, straight back. All right, so right here where my fingers are is about where it's gonna be. Now that will fold independently from the rest of it. All right, so we know where that's gonna be on that end, but before we can glue this side down, we wanna get a relief cut on the opposite side as well. So we're folding that over and taking a look at where that would be, and it's kind of where this buckles in together and makes that loop, which is really just right on that edge. This side on the front has a harder, curve than the opposite end. It's a little bit more of an abstract shape, so it's right on that corner. So just to confirm, we've got the right location. Gonna grab our knife and cut straight back. All right, and again, you don't want to rip the fabric. You want to make sure you're cutting pretty cleanly with it. That folds independently. At this point, we're gonna grab our adhesive again and we're gonna secure this flat back. Now, you wanna make sure you're not spraying all the way to the top here, because then it's gonna adhere just like this. We need to be able to cut off that excess. We're really just adhering to the factory rubber, or the factory, faux leather. We're gonna go right to the edge on the inside here. So just measure out where you think that would be. So it's about like an inch up. There's a good inch worth of fabric. And we're gonna spray our adhesive and get that glued down. At this point, we're gonna take our flap and we're gonna fold it over as tight as we possibly can to the inside. At this point, I threw a glove on just because we are in a second gonna work with a little bit of adhesion promoter, which is what we have that sponge here for. Now, we're just gonna basically, while this side's drying up, it's looking pretty good. We just wanna do pretty much the same thing on the other side down here. So we're gonna fold this over, find right about the same area, right about there. We're gonna grab our knife and just do the same thing. All right, we're basically applying our adhesion promoter right now. It's this sponge, it's gonna go right around the edging. All right, at this point, we can just fold the flap over. Now at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold this back this way, but in order to keep these two from overlapping and causing a big lump, we're actually gonna cut this line that we cut before straight back to get this little triangle out of place. That way, it will cause a nice even surface. So, what we do, just follow this back. With that out of place, this will sit a lot more flush. Now before we can actually move forward with that, we're gonna need to cut our release cut on this side. All right, now at this point, we have this small triangle to work with. But before we start folding this in, what I'm gonna do is adhere this down. We're gonna get that nice and tight. And once that's stuck, we're gonna cut all this excess flap off. That way, it's not in the way of this. From there, we'll be able to make another cut here and get that to go down straight. So from here, we're gonna fold this back. All right, now we can take that flap and get it into place. Now, while we have this other side basically having the same thing happen, we're letting this get nice and tacky, I'm actually gonna cut this triangle right off. So we're basically gonna use this line as a guide and go straight down this plastic just to get this excess flap out of the way. You don't wanna do this until this is completely dry together. This has to be adhered perfectly before you start cutting it off. While this side's drying over here, we have that laid down. What we're gonna do is start our next cut over this side. So we have this little bit of triangle on the other side of the stitching here that we need to cut. But the tricky part is you don't want to cut all the way down. You don't want to cut any fabric off. We're just cutting the slit so that this can get folded over. So just make sure your cut isn't too close to the edge here, because otherwise it'll come off and we don't want that. So what we're gonna do is start from right where it touches the plastic, just up a little high, just like this. I'm gonna go straight back along the edge of that stitching. From here, this is basically gonna get folded back just like that. The trick is you cannot pull too tight or it's gonna rip right off because it's a very thin piece. So what we're gonna do, spray our adhesive. All right, we're gonna let that get nice and tacky before we do anything. The more tackiness it has, the more you let it just sit there for like a good 3 to 5 minutes, the better that adhesion's gonna be. All right, at this point we can take this flap and fold it in, but you wanna make sure you're not pulling too tight. All right, so next step here, we've got this side cut, we've got this side laid down. I'm just gonna cut, again, basically doing the same thing, cut around that edge so this has a better place to roll. So we're just gonna take our X-Acto or box cutter, cut around that edge. Now for this next flap, this is really important. You wanna make sure you're using adhesion promoter as well. That's definitely gonna help because this is an important flap that you wanna keep down given that it has this stitching. So we're just gonna pop this sponge out with the adhesion promoter. I'm gonna rub that right along the entire section that this is going to apply to. The other thing I want to point out here is that you don't want to adhere to the holes that your screws are going to go to. Make sure you're just adhering below that. So once that's taken care of, we're going to grab our adhesive spray. We're gonna let that tack up. Then we'll hit it with a second layer and we'll fold it over. All right, from here we're gonna fold this flap up and get it nice and tight. All right, at this point, we're basically gonna do the exact same thing, but on the bottom. As you see, I've already got one flap tucked in. I've got this flap cut at the seam, just like we did up top. I'm gonna cut the excess off of this, fold that in. Once we have that glued, we're gonna fold this in, and then we can just cut the excess here. So that's what we're gonna do. First off, let's cut the excess from what we already have. At this point, guys, we have everything adhered down. We just have to cut off all this excess. Cut off the top, cut off the bottom, then we'll tackle the sides. Now, when you're cutting it, you don't want to cut it at the edge there. You want to cut it up more close to the nub. You want to get at least like maybe a 3/4 of an inch to an inch of fabric still in place. So what I'm going to do is mark probably right about here. Just go straight across. Now again, you don't want to be ripping it. You want to make sure that your cut is clean through. They should pull apart fairly easily. You might have to go over a couple times on the seams. Perfect. Now we can do the other side. All right, with the top and bottom cut, we can get the sides out of the way, at least the excess. Since we already have that already cut, we're going to go straight across, make it nice and even. The big thing is just to get the fabric away from the screw holes. That's a clean cut, so we're just going to do it on the other side. At this point, we're gonna take our backing and we're gonna be able to set this in place. The good thing about this is you can tuck, some of that excess in and it's gonna get held down by this piece. So once we make sure that everything is where we need it to be, we're gonna take those factory screws, and we're gonna put it back in place. Perfect. So we have nice clean lines on the sides. It's all tucked in pretty nicely. At this point, the only screws left are the 4 at the bottom, which go in the vehicle. So now we can reinstall it. All right, at this point, we can hold our armrest cover back into place on those brackets. We're gonna reuse those factory screws to get them back in place. I'm gonna go ahead and start threading one on by hand. We'll do that for all 4. All right, once you have them started by hand, grab your Phillips head and tighten them up. All right, with all 4 of those tight, you can just shut it and you're good to go. Well guys, that's gonna wrap up my quick review and full install walkthrough for the armrest cover with the silver Mustang GT embroidery. You can pick yours up right here at AmericanMuscle.com.